very good afternoon to you, dear viewer in Kenya and around the world. My name is Maina, and I welcome you to this edition of Live, a program that analyzes evocative global issues making headlines and which have an impact on you, the viewer. As always, our focus is on politics, health, education, as well as arts and culture. But first, a look at the stories making headlines in the world. We start off from France, where French President Emmanuel Macron is set to meet trade unions and employers' organizations on Monday in a bid to diffuse weeks of unrest in Paris and other cities. Monday's meeting comes ahead of a TV address in which he is expected to announce measures in response. France has seen 4 weekends of violent protests against fuel tax rises, living costs, and other issues. About 136,000 yellow vest protesters took to the streets on Saturday, with more than 1,200 of them being taken into custody. The capital, Paris, was particularly badly hit, with windows smashed, cars burned, and shops looted, as 10,000 people took part in the demonstrations. Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire described the situation as a catastrophe for businesses and the economy. Moving on to Armenia, where the acting Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has won a convincing victory in Sunday's parliamentary election, consolidating his authority. According to the country's electoral commission, Pashinyan's bloc My Step Alliance won more than 70% of the vote, while its nearest rival, the moderate Prosperous Armenia Party, won just over 8%. The polls whose turnout was low at 49%. A journalist turned politician, Mr. Pashinyan, spearheaded a peaceful revolution in April. Following his win, he now has a parliamentary majority to push through his program of tackling corruption and reforming the economy. Historically, Armenia's elections have been marred by fraud and vote buying, but correspondents said there was hope that this one would be different. International observers from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe were among those who are monitoring the process. Finally, the number of births by C-section is on the rise, climbing more about 16 million, which is 12.1% of all births, in 2000 to 29.7 million, which is 21.1% of all births in 2015. This is according to a study published on Thursday in the medical journal The Lancet. The research revealed that C-sections remain more common in certain parts of the world. In 2015, its use was up to 10 times more frequent in Latin American and Caribbean regions, where it was used in 44.3% of births, than in West and Central African regions, where it was used in only 4.1% of births, according to the study. In the United States, 32% of births were by C-section in 2015, an increase from 23% in 2000, the data showed, and in the United Kingdom, 26.2% of births were by C-section in 2015, up from 19.7% in 2000. The new study noted that C-section should be universally accessible, as it can be life-saving in some cases, but a rise in C-section for non-medical emergencies has become a point of concern because the procedure can pose risks such as risk of infection or postpartum heavy bleeding. And we stay on that story on the increased number of CS births, whereby research indicates that there's an increase in the number of C-section births globally, rising from 12.1% of all births in 2000 to 21.1% of all births in 2015. This means that more than 1 in 5 babies is delivered via C-section, something that health professionals say is alarming. Consequently, WHO has published new guidelines on non-clinical interventions aimed at reducing the number of C-section births. The key recommendations include educational interviews, use of clinical guidelines, requirement for second opinion for C-section, and intervention aimed at health organizations such as collaborating with midwives. In Kenya, the Ministry of Health has raised concerns over the increase in unintended CS births, which stand at 50% and which cut across both private and public hospitals in rural and urban areas. This brings us to the question, what is contributing to the increased number of CS births in Kenya? Let me know your take on the issue by joining the conversation online. My Twitter handle is at Maina, and on Facebook, Maina, #MMLive.
Motherhood is a stage that many women look forward to. The realization that one is pregnant is met with excitement and jubilation, and equally, preparations in readiness for the big day start in earnest. However, as the due date nears, panic sets in as the mother-to-be starts wondering how the delivery process is going to be. For first-time mothers, the uncertainty of how the labor process progresses makes the waiting period a torturous one. Attempts to seek explanations from Google does not help, as one is often met with the warning that labor is different for every mother. For some, it takes hours, and for others, even days. For some, they never know the baby is due until the midwife says so, no pain, no struggle. But for others, they experience every bit of pain with all the drama that comes with. It is this fear and uncertainty that has left one expectant young mother Adelaide confused and anxious about the moment when her labor pains will strike.
Right now I'm 5 months pregnant and it's really scary to think about I'm going to go through labor and all that. But the most scary part is that I'm going to have to go through birthing, and I'm scared which type of birthing I have to go through, because there's the cesarean one and there's also the one for the normal birth, and each of them are painful in their own way. So it's really scary for me.
Oftentimes, the expectation of a smooth delivery is interrupted by complications that see the mother end up on operating table for a C-section. While for some mothers, the C-section is medically necessary to save their lives and that of their baby, for others, it is an option they take out of choice. However, a disturbing trend in Kenya is the increased number of mothers who are nursing CS cars that were not medically necessary. They had no complications to warrant such, but in their weakest moments, the medics took advantage of their vulnerability for commercial interests. The CS cars is a reminder of how rotten the Kenyan health sector has become. For Live, I'm Sharon Kabiru.
Thank you, Sharon, for that report. Are there any new developments on the issue?
Well, Mercy, from what I've gathered from people and the doctors is that C-section has become rampant today in the country and all over the world, and we've seen most women actually opt to go for C-section instead of the normal delivery because of 1 to 3 reasons. Even if there are no complications and they are not required to do C-section, and it's actually sad because few and fewer women are embracing the natural birth, and they're left with scars, from what I've learned from the doctors, that take a lot of time or might develop infections when after the C-section has been done. I will just like to encourage more people to embrace the normal delivery, and not unless you're required to take the C-section. Mercy, I would like to say that people should go for normal delivery as they're required to, because now we're seeing trends of commercialization of the C-section, which is not appropriate and ethically correct. Thank you.
And to shed more light on this issue of the increased number of C-sections in Kenya, I'm joined by 3 experts. My first guest is Dr. Alfred Murage. He's a consultant gynecologist. My second guest is Esther Kimani, a certified doula, childbirth expert and child care expert. And I'm also joined by Dr. Kizito Lubano. He's a consultant gynecologist, a principal research officer at the Kenya Medical Research Institute, KEMRI, and a reproductive health expert. For this show, he joins us as a public health policy analyst with the Ministry of Health. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Let me start with you, Dr. Murage. What are the circumstances that may make a woman undergo a C-section birth?
One of the commonest reasons why cesarean sections are done is for women who already have had a previous cesarean. So the way to think about reducing our number of cesarean sections is to work out why we are doing the first cesarean in the first instance. Now, if we look at women who require cesareans, as I said, there would be very absolute reasons.
The head of the Directorate of Preventive and Promotive Health in the Ministry of Health, Dr. Peter Cherutich, in his address during the 46th Annual Scientific Conference in Mombasa said, and I quote, "Most people who do C-section are members of the Kenya Medical Association," end of quote. Is there a commercial interest in C-section births?
There could be something like that, because obviously a cesarean section costs much more than a vaginal birth, and therefore the clinician is going to generate more revenue by doing more cesareans. The institution equally will generate more revenue by doing more cesareans, and it's even though I wouldn't want to say that that's a major contributor, we cannot get that out of the equation of talking about rising cesarean sections. And more so if you look at data in private hospitals versus public hospitals, you'll see a lot of differences in the cesarean section numbers. And even though people who go to those hospitals will be different in terms of their clinical parameters and why they might end up with a cesarean, sometimes the discrepancy in terms of the eventual cesarean section rate is so high, and you cannot run away from the fact that there could be a commercial interest and therefore a rise in cesarean sections because of.
Dr. Murage, several of the women who I have talked to and who have undergone C-section births stated that they opted for the method purely for cosmetic purposes for fear of damaging their honey jars, hence ruining their sex lives. Is this assumed effect of natural birth a fact or a myth?
I would say it's a mixture of both, but mostly a myth. The first thing we must understand is vaginal birth is a natural process. And in medical terms, we say it's something physiological. The body is attuned to accommodating pregnancy and childbirth. And therefore, if there's going to be a smooth natural birth, the vaginal canal, the uterus, the whole reproductive system is going to recover from all that, and there shouldn't be an effect on sexual function beyond that. We shouldn't run away from the fact that some deliveries end up with complications, and sometimes these things can interfere with sexual functioning beyond that. But these are rare things that will happen. If they happen and then they are addressed correctly and in a timely manner, these people will end up having normal sexual functioning. So never advise anybody to think about having a cesarean.
Now we move on to Esther. Esther is a doula. Your role is to bridge the gap that exists between mothers and healthcare providers by supporting mothers from conception all through pregnancy and postpartum period up to 2 years. How exactly do you bridge the gap?
So one of the things that helps women to understand the dangers of CSs when they are not necessary is just information. Every woman who's pregnant should aim to have a childbirth class, because in a childbirth class, you're not only informed about what happens during labor, but you're taught coping strategies that will help you go through a normal delivery without the fear that comes with it. Yes, labor is painful, but it's also very manageable when you know what to expect and what to do about it. So when women are well informed, then they make the right decisions regarding labor and birth, and why it is so important for a baby to go through normal delivery, and the benefits both to the mother and to the baby.
Esther, what would you advise mothers who prefer CS even when it is not medically necessary?
Take a childbirth class. You will understand the reason, you will understand the risks, because a C-section is major surgery. It places a lot of strain to your body. For a baby who's born via C-section, more and more we are learning, research is showing that these babies actually lack a few things. They lack the beneficial vaginal environment that gives the baby more immunity in terms of their gut maturing. Those babies are not able to establish breastfeeding as quickly, and so we already have issues starting off breastfeeding. It's been shown that the gut of a baby who's been born vaginally is very, very different from one who's been born by C-section. A recent study showed that the gut of the baby born by C-section carried the bacteria from the equipment and from the lump, and a baby who's been born vaginally has further increased benefits from the mother's vaginal environment that gives them further immunity. We also see that these babies, as they're passing through the birth canal, they are able to have, breathe better, so they suffer less from respiratory distress when they're born. And so there's so many other benefits. For the mother, quicker recovery, so you get back and you're able to take care of your baby, you don't have a wound to heal.
We wrap this up with Dr. Kizito Lubano. Daktari, as a ministry, what are you doing to address the concerns by WHO over increased cases of C-section births in the world and more so in Kenya?
Our current challenge as a Ministry of Health, as a country, as a population, is the high rate of maternal death during childbirth. And the aim and the focus and the thrust of us as a country is to reduce the complications as much as possible, the deaths as much as possible, both in the babies and in the mothers. Whatever it is that we need to do, if it is that cesarean section that is going to save a mother, to avert a complication for that baby. But even if it was 100% that is the thing that will reduce maternal death, will reduce complications, I would do it.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me. Now let me sample some of your feedback. And from Twitter at Sharon Kabiru says, well, the WHO has a legitimate concern. I agree with Dr. Lubano's approach to the issue. If a C-section is what it will take to save a mother and her child, then statistics should be secondary. All said and done, it is unfortunate that you have some medical practitioners who, despite taking an oath to abide by certain ethical guidelines, they put their commercial interest before those of mothers. My heart goes out to all the mothers who are nursing CS cars which are not necessary medically. However, the Ministry of Health ought to develop policies to regulate these unethical practices whereby doctors recommend CA sections even they are not necessary. It is, however, commendable for the doulas, the women and the experts out there who are bridging the gap between healthcare providers and the mothers as they make it easy for both the doctors and the mothers during delivery. That's the bottom line. My name is Maina, and that brings us to the end of Live this afternoon. Thank you for joining me. Let's do this again next week.